Okay, good morning. Good morning, folks. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Such a pleasure to see such a good turnout for today's sessions, kicking off here as we are with this robust panel of folks that are ready to share their experiences. I'm Bob Frank. I'm the Dean of Arts and Sciences, and I'd like to welcome everybody and express my appreciation for your participation in the sessions today. Back, maybe about a year ago, right, Lori, we kicked around this idea of funding opportunities for faculty learning communities in a more robust way. And as you think about those kind of efforts, you wonder whether anyone will be interested. And here we have some visible evidence that, in fact, there was interest in putting together learning communities and getting together and talking about a number of issues that have to do with our professional practice. So I'm very grateful to everyone for interest in this whole enterprise. I know there are people both up front here and in the audience that have participated, and we're very much looking forward to doing this again next year. So I don't know if we're going to have a formal announcement about that, or is this it? Okay. But I think it's been very successful, and it was very gratifying to see people working together on these things. And it'll be even more interesting then to hear about some of the outcomes. So this was part of the deal, just in case you're thinking about doing this, that we didn't want people just to meet and then keep to themselves all those nuggets of wisdom that had been generated, but to have an opportunity to share more broadly what they learned from participating in the learning community. So that's, I think, part of the plan for today is to have that kind of opportunity to talk to other folks and hopefully get people interested in participating in various ways in those activities. So is that as much as I need to do? I think it might be. Because I want to sit down and hear what folks have to say. So I guess I'll hand this off to Laurie so she can take us forward.
All right, great, thank you. Thanks so much to Dean Frank for his support of the faculty learning communities and also the Curricular Themes Initiative. Representatives from all of these groups are being represented here at the event today. And I'd like to thank some of our colleagues who have been very instrumental in helping to put together this event. Linda Shepner, assistant to the dean, special thanks to Linda. And I want to extend special thanks to Tim Vickers. Tim Vickers, yay! My friend and colleague, Tim Vickers, who's been so helpful in this event and other events that we have put on in the Faculty Commons, and really, really appreciate that. Lori Bauer is Director of Communications for Arts and Sciences. Kevin Davis is video streaming this event for colleagues who cannot attend the event in person.
It is time delayed, so if you misstep with your language.
And I'd also like to acknowledge our planning committee. If you just want to raise your hands, those who were on the planning committee for the showcase event. Yeah, Neil should have raised his hand. Yeah. So when we got together as a planning committee, we wanted to develop a theme for this event, and the obvious one had to do with faculty teaching and learning collaborations. Faculty collaborations with other faculty, with students, with instructional staff and other colleagues. And we came up with kind of the subtitle of Daring to Collaborate. And the reason for that is because collaborations in teaching and learning offer so many opportunities and rewards, but at the same time, they often get us out of our usual navigated terrain in teaching and learning and take us into areas where we may be a little bit outside of our comfort zone. So we'll be hearing about some of those challenges as well as strategies that our groups have developed to address some of these challenges, as well as the opportunities and the rewards. So that's just a little snapshot. I'd like to introduce our panelists today. Start with Talinn Phillips. Talinn is Assistant Professor of English, and she co-led a faculty learning community on working with multilingual and international students with Don Bukowski, who's Director of the English Language Improvement Program in Linguistics. Also like to introduce Neil Bernstein, Professor of Classics and World Religions. He co-led a faculty learning community focusing on challenges in teaching, learning from one another with Herta Rodina, who's Associate Professor of French, and he's also invited a colleague from the faculty learning community to work with him and talk with him on this panel. And Neil, would you like to introduce your colleague, Chris?
Please let me introduce Chris Griffin from biology.
Yeah, thanks so much to Chris for coming as well. Haley Duchinsky is Director for the Center for Law, Justice, and Culture and Associate Professor of Anthropology. She led a team-taught course for the Making and Breaking the Law curricular theme. Raymond Frost is Professor of Management Information Systems and a colleague from the College of Business. He co-led a faculty learning community on team-based learning with Charlie Morgan, who is Assistant Professor of Sociology. Muriel Gallego is Assistant Professor of Spanish, and I'm so happy I now know how to pronounce your last name. She led a faculty learning community on collaborative professional development for graduate teaching assistants. So those are our panelists for today. Yay! So the idea for the panelists is not only to give a snapshot of opportunities, rewards, challenges, strategies, but also to give a preview of the sessions to come. So each of these colleagues are also going to be facilitating or co-facilitating one of the sessions here today. So we thought it was kind of like a little tasting menu, as well as providing a nice overview of some of the central challenges and rewards of collaborative teaching and learning opportunities. So each individual is going to take about 5 minutes to talk about their particular initiative, challenges, rewards, strategies, anything at all, and then we'll open it up for discussion after that. So Talinn, would you like to get us started?
And I was working with John Bukowski, who's up here in the front. So our faculty learning community was titled Global Education in Diverse Classrooms. And so our initial motivation as the leaders was to try to help support teachers support the multilingual and international students in their classrooms more effectively. So we were really approaching it from the perspective of helping teachers develop strategies to work with their students that they could then kind of propagate out into their departments and adapt things for their departments that would be really context specific for them. Okay? So based on participant interest, we talked about things like increasing classroom participation, integrating multilingual and international students better into our classrooms, uncovering the hidden curriculum or things that our native English-speaking students have probably picked up along the way, but that our international students might not have ever had exposure to before, say how to interpret feedback from teachers or what's appropriate interaction between teachers and students or between students and other students. We looked at responding to multilingual students' work, particularly written work. But one of the things that surfaced for us really quickly was that we could do these things in our classrooms. We could make changes in our own classrooms, but that the issues we were talking about were really systemic and were institutional issues, and that what we did in any one person's classroom was going to have a pretty limited effect. And so Dawn and I had recognized this in the abstract from the beginning, and that was why we were hoping that people would take things out into their departments. But what I think surfaced for the whole group was we want to do more than just make changes in our own classrooms. We want to look at how we can make systemic institutional changes. And so once we got into that work, I think this was both the opportunity and challenge for us in terms of collaborating. Collaborating was easy in our group where my change didn't impact anybody else's change. We could all sort of be autonomous. But once we started looking at institutional things, then we were really seeing how, my idea might work well in my class, it might be terrible in somebody else's class because of different disciplinary differences and things like that. So as one example of that, we had talked about, well, where are some places in the undergraduate experience where we could really introduce our native English-speaking students, prepare them to be better colleagues with international students, teach them how to interact more effectively. So we were trying to figure out, okay, so where are places in the undergraduate experience that we could do this? We talked about Bobcat student orientation in terms of a place where everybody is. But at the same time, people who had been involved with BSO were talking about how much information overload happened in those few days. And, you know, is anything, their program is already so packed, we would really be fighting for space in that. And is anything that we say in that context really going to stick, given how much information is coming at students? So as we started looking at ways to implement things, then we really had to start considering everyone else's context as well and looking at how to adapt things. So ultimately, the outcomes for the group, I think, are going to be much more effective because we're accounting for all of those differences up front and all of those different contexts. We had people who, you know, I primarily work in writing classes. We have other people in other disciplinary classes at the undergraduate level, people at the graduate level, and some people like Sherry Sains working in the library. So people interacting with students in all these different contexts. So ultimately, this is going to give us a lot better outcomes, but it's made it a lot more challenging and a lot more slower going, I think, in the meantime. So as we move forward, we've done that initial work of thinking about what kind of changes we want to see, and now it's looking at how can we actually implement them.
Great. So my name is Haley Dushinsky, and I'm here today to talk a little bit about my experiences as the theme leader for the Making and Breaking the Law theme. I'll just say a few words about the theme now, and then I'll offer some kind of general and even abstract comments on collaborative and interdisciplinary teaching, and then perhaps we can get into more of the nuts and bolts during the discussion and during the afternoon session on collaborative teaching. So over the last 2 years, really, I've been very fortunate to be a part of the Curricular Themes Initiative. And the Making and Breaking the Law theme started to take form 2 years ago at the end of spring semester during a 2-week retreat. And that retreat was coordinated and carried out by myself and also 3 of my colleagues and friends who constitute the curriculum committee for the theme. That's Kevin Yahalde from history, Kathleen Sullivan from political science, and Bruce Hoffman from sociology criminology. So we worked really closely together and collaboratively over that 2-week period to lay the foundations for the theme. We then launched the theme this past fall semester with a freshman gateway course called Breaking the Law. Just a word about the overall theme curriculum. The way that we have designed the theme is that we really wanted to address 2 different concerns, right, for incoming students, for undergraduate students. So the first concern that we wanted to address was to offer them an introductory course coming in fall of freshman year to capture them, to spark their imagination, and to really kind of take them through the process of asking big questions, learning how to ask those questions, and learning how to explore them in a university setting. So that's what the Theme Gateway course is designed to do. After that, then, we have a curriculum that stretches from freshman to senior year of different linked courses across the departments. The idea is that students come in freshman year, they take the Gateway course called Breaking the Law, which is designed to break down their assumptions about the law, right? They leave the course with more questions than answers. And then as they proceed through college, through their departmental classes, through special enhanced opportunities for research, for study abroad, for project-based learning, they rebuild a new understanding of the law, culminating in a capstone course or a research experience, right? So that's the kind of integrated curriculum that we've developed. And through all of this curriculum development process, it's been very, very rewarding to work closely and collaboratively with the curriculum committee and also with a broader network of faculty that are very, very invested and engaged with the theme. I'll just illustrate the opportunities and challenges that we've encountered associated with interdisciplinary teaching with a classic kind of pedagogical example, right? And again, this is something kind of abstract, but it really speaks to me as I think back about the experiences in the classroom and out of the classroom relating to the theme. So I'll ask you to imagine 4 fruits. 4 fruits sitting on a table, right? An apple, a pear, a peach, and an orange. All the different fruits are presented together in front of you, and experiencing them, seeing them, you're invited to think about them through discretion. You see them as 4 discrete objects. You discriminate among these fruits, and then you start to compare them. You note their similarities, you note their differences, right? Next, imagine the fruits together in a basket. Once the fruits have come together in a basket, you start to see them as a new entity. A new object has been created. It's a fruit basket. No longer 4 discrete objects, but all of them together in one place. The 4 fruits have been synthesized in this new context, right? A new meaning is associated with the basket. I think about myself and my colleagues as these 4 fruits in a basket, me and Kevin and Bruce and Kathleen, right? In the fruit basket of the course. So this process of synthesis, I think, is really the greatest opportunity for me associated with collaborative teaching, and it's also the greatest challenge. The creation of a new set of relationships, right? It produces something new. And this can be really exciting. In very real terms, you're given the opportunity to get out of your conceptual framework, to get out of your own conceptual box, and to be willing to be surprised, right? To experience something new, to see your own scholarship, to see your own teaching, to see your own methodological approaches, to see your own disciplinary assumptions with a new perspective and a new point of view. So this can be very exciting, but it can also be kind of scary, right? You have to be willing to take on this challenge. It can be uncomfortable, but it is a productive form of discomfort, right? And I think that's where the central kind of tension of collaborative teaching lies, which speaks to the theme of daring to collaborate.
So who was the orange? I love that. That's all right.
I was thinking that through.
So please.
Okay, so I'm Raymond Frost from the College of Business, and Charlie Morgan and I, Charlie's over there, Charlie, raise your hand, okay, led a faculty learning community on team-based learning. And let me start out by saying that when you ask people why they got into teaching, and you sort of probe deeply, very often people end up with some form of, well, I really love the subject, and I really want my students to love the subject as well. And it turns out that that's actually, if you've taught for a while, you realize that's pretty hard to do unless you're, unless you're teaching some upper level courses. So the question is, what do you do if you're teaching sort of more intro level courses? And sort of a next step down from my students are really going to love the subject might be, well, my students are going to engage critically with the subject. And that's what we have found that team-based learning, this particular methodology of team-based learning, does and produces. And it's really exciting. I mean, if you talk to Charlie and I for any length of time, you'll see that we're real evangelists for this teaching methodology. We've got a session this afternoon right after lunch. And we would love for you to come. If you haven't signed up already, I think that's still okay. Charlie, do you want to throw in a few more words there?
Yeah, I think if you're interested, the best way is to just come to the session. And Raymond does an amazing thing where he teaches you about team-based learning using team-based learning.
Right, we won't lecture to you. You actually will go through, you'll actually go through the team-based learning. So it'll be a fun activity as well. I think we may also have an information table out there with some handouts if you just want to stop by, even if you aren't planning to attend our session.
Thank you.
Sure.
My name is Muriel Gallego, and Gallego or any other is fine. And I co-led, because Lori was involved as well, a faculty learning community concerning the professional development of TAs. And in my department, our TAs are the instructor of record of the intro classes. But then I soon found out that that wasn't the case in every department. And so that was one of our biggest challenges, to collaborate and find answers to our questions or find possible solutions to our issues, given the different realities that every department has with how TAs are trained and mentored, and how do we use TAs in our departments. And so we have all of our members were colleagues who are somewhat involved with TAs, whether they're coordinating or mentoring or in charge of a multi-section course. And so we had somebody from math, and you will meet them in a little bit at 11:15. But we have somebody from math, somebody from biology, somebody from physics, and somebody from English, and myself, who we're all involved with TAs in different positions. And so each one of us identified not a problem, but an issue or something that they wanted to research a little more in depth and discuss with the group, and so their own departments could benefit from it. And that was challenging in itself because everybody identified a different topic that they wanted to discuss, so each person was in charge of facilitating that day and that discussion, and we had things from building portfolios to looking at what other resources other universities have for TAs to see if we could identify commonalities or share ideas with them. We also talked about international TAs and a number of other issues. And so our outcome is an e-portfolio that we're building as resources for incoming TAs and possibly our existing TAs. We have a few videos, and it's in the making. It's still a work in progress, but we're happy to show you what we got so far if you stay a little longer. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Neil Bernstein in Classics and World Religions, and Herta Rodina and I would like to thank Dean Frank, Dean Hatch, and the college for funding this faculty learning community now in its second iteration. We had a similar version of the faculty learning community last year under the name of Taking Risks in Teaching. So our participants came from a wide variety of disciplines: biology, chemistry, classics, English, history, modern languages, philosophy, and visual communications. We were of all faculty ranks and also of all campuses. We had 2 participants from the regional campuses. We discussed a wide variety of topics, and we're continuing to discuss them on our blog, which is Challenges in Teaching, all one word, at wordpress.com. Chris and I will be co-leading a session at starting at 11:15, where we'll be doing some of the same things that we did in the faculty learning community. If you're interested, please do stop by and bring your particular challenge in teaching. We discussed issues such as how to engage students in the initial courses of a curricular sequence, where they find out that their high school conception of what an academic subject is may be quite different from the college reality. We discussed progressive pedagogies, including Bell Hooks' concept of teaching to transgress. We discussed how to empower students to be active and self-confident participants in the classroom, how to identify and change implicit bias in a classroom, and how to teach effectively to a student population that every year is going to be less prepared, read less, and expect less challenge. We discussed particular...
That must be some other country.
We discussed how writing it works not only as a skill in itself, but as a way of understanding a variety of other kinds of learning outcomes, how to evaluate student learning and decide what constitutes meaningful learning, and finally, how to evaluate faculty teaching effectiveness. How do we measure what we do and speak definitively about what we accomplish within the classroom? We were also favored with 2 visitors to our seminar. Raymond came and gave a wonderful presentation on team-based learning, and Todd Zakrasik from University of North Carolina talked about leveraging the expertise of colleagues, using people who may be expert in a particular kind of teaching methodology that you want to incorporate in your own classroom. Let me hand off now to Chris.
So I was lucky enough to be part of this faculty learning community, and I was teaching a half-semester course this semester. So it didn't start until halfway through our learning community. So I was able to take some of the things that I had learned in our community and apply it directly to a class. I had taught this 8 times before, and 2 of my biggest problems were class participation and student preparedness. So kind of fighting against that in an introductory biology setting where students are very reluctant to read the book. I think my favorite question ever is, do I have to buy the textbook? Yes, yes, only if you want to pass. So one of the things that several of the other colleagues had mentioned doing in their classrooms that I had dismissed out of hand was dailies. That literally every day you come into the classroom and you start with a 2 to 3 minute writing assignment or quiz or something to get everybody on the same page. And I had always looked at that as too much time out of my lecture time and too much work for me to grade afterwards. So not really worth doing. When I started doing them in this class, it was amazing how quickly the students responded, because my dailies were on 2 subjects every single time. What did we talk about last time? What are we talking about today? And very, very quickly the students realized, hey, my participation points are linked directly to how well I do on these dailies. So I have to read before I show up to class, which amazingly enough helped them remember what was going on in class, helped them participate in class by asking really good questions instead of questions about what I had just said, and more in-depth questions, which from a group of freshmen who were already struggling with introductory biology was really gratifying to see, to have them participate and to have them be prepared. And it also helped me with implicit bias, because I was using these dailies as their participation points. So instead of putting the participation on, were you capable of speaking up in class, your participation was, did you prepare for class? Were you ready for class? Have you studied since the last class? Since a lot of the students are reluctant to speak up, even in a smaller classroom setting. So I'm teaching larger classes next year, but I'm hoping to be able to use something like Blackboard to continue doing dailies, even with 200 students instead of 20.
Great. Thank you very much. So we wanted to make sure we had plenty of time for discussion and questions, in addition to these more or less prepared remarks from our panelists. So we do want to just open it up for discussion, questions, and since I'm here, I think I'll start with questions. So going along with the theme of daring to collaborate, could you just reflect on something that was especially unexpected or challenging that you had not anticipated at the beginning of your collaborative efforts?
Apparently the answer is no.
I can think of one. You're talking about the collaboration in our learning community, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, so we had some faculty that, as we were explaining what was behind team-based learning, they would say, well, you know, that sounds good, but I don't see how that would work in my discipline. And what was so cool about the learning community, we said, well, tell us a little bit about what you're doing. And the faculty member did. And then, without Charlie and I jumping in at all, everyone said, well, you could do this, you know, and you could do that. And by the end of it, it was such an eye-opening experience for the faculty member, and quite frankly, for us. And she left that session, I think, maybe had been perhaps on the fence about TBL prior to that session, and I think left that session feeling like, wow, this could really work. So definitely that energy came directly out of the collaboration.
Cool.
I already mentioned a little bit about the differences between units and how for us in English, our TAs are instructor of record, and say, for example, some other TAs would lead labs, and that's completely different, or some other TAs would not lead labs or teach a class. And so that was to find commonalities. Okay, they're TAs, but to find commonalities in their practices or the answers that we could give them in their training, I think that was the challenge in the collaboration that we found.
I'm going to jump in here because I was able to attend some of the discussions. I remember the discussion where a member of the group said, wow, we could develop an e-portfolio and have students actually learn how to become a teaching assistant at Ohio University before they even step foot at the university. And I'm looking at the colleague who made that suggestion. Do you want to say a little bit more about that? Put you on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like using a learning portfolio or an e-portfolio would help students to identify their areas that need work. So if they want to be an effective teacher and be hired. Those are two different things, but in each case, once they start developing an e-portfolio and understand what goes into that, they might identify some areas that they would need to work on or skills that they would need to acquire. So perhaps becoming an instructor of record if possible, or developing a course.
Right, so the comments for I was asked to repeat or for the video. Are we okay for that? Great, all right, great.
I'd like to talk a little about the importance of benchmarking in our community. We are all in our own department with its own disciplinary history, with its own political situation, with its own particular kind of means of recruiting students and forming them. And to say, well, wait, this challenge that we face, it manifests in different forms, on a different campus, in a different course, on a different kind of course, a different sequence in a curriculum, and being able to get the expertise of 10 people of saying, well, we've faced variations on this challenge, and this is one way that we perceive it. That was extremely powerful and generated a lot of discussion both in our seminar meeting and as I say on our blog, continued actively on the blogs after our particular meeting time.
We have a question.
How do you evaluate teaching collaboration and learning cooperation separate?
So the question is, how do you evaluate teaching collaborations and learning collaborations?
Learning cooperation, and I would assume you probably evaluate differently, right?
So, and it will be, I think, very much dependent upon the particular endeavor that the individuals here are representing. I know, do you want to say something about the team-based learning evaluation of students? That could be an easy way to start answering that question, I think.
Is that what the question is, about team-based learning and how it's used with the students, or is it about the faculty learning community? And
just in general, you teaching, you collaborate to teach. Learning, you collaborate to learn, right? How do you evaluate them?
Well, I think one of the things that at least some of the themes have been wrestling with this year that are having team talk courses, and you could definitely speak to this, is how do you evaluate it?
Right.
And just all the logistics of, so you have people in 4 or 5 different departments, and you're evaluating 80 students are doing evaluations, and who do those evaluations get attached to? And how do you attach them to the person who had the most interaction with the students? And I think that's been pretty tricky. And I think it will probably take a few iterations before that gets worked out. I don't know, how have you guys done that?
I can say a word about that from the reference of the themes, right? I think you're exactly right. It has been very tricky. So the evaluation, I'm thinking about it on 2 levels. And one is the evaluation within the co-taught class itself at the end of the semester. And then the other level is across the theme curriculum. How do you kind of track and evaluate student success through the theme over time? So there's different answers to both of those questions, right? And we're still kind of thinking through the second one. And I might like to actually consult with some of you and some of the panelists here on thinking about e-portfolios and long-term assessments. In the class itself, the way that our class was arranged, each of the 4 instructors were responsible for a separate section of 30 students. So there's 120 students in the class that we're all co-teaching. But then we also have a section of 30 that we're primarily responsible for. So last semester when we taught it for the first time, we developed an evaluation process that gave students the opportunity to provide feedback on the course overall and also on their individual section. And we worked with Tim Vickers. Is Tim still here? We worked with Tim at the end of the semester. Tim came in and spent an entire class period doing focus groups with the different students. Sections, so that he videotaped it, he summarized it and interpreted it for us and helped us understand the focus group feedback, which was incredibly helpful for us, and was able to talk to them in groups about what challenges they faced in the class, what they felt they had gotten out of it, how things looked from their perspective.
So that's how you evaluate the learning.
Mm-hmm.
And our students get the ABC grade, right? Now, another question is how you evaluate how effective you are teaching.
okay, right. So for example, with team-based learning typically isn't team taught, right? It's typically a single faculty member. The teams are the students, right? The student teams. So let me address it two ways. As far as the student teams go, and evaluating, they actually evaluate one another using an electronic peer evaluation. But I don't think that's the thrust of your question. The thrust of your question really is, how do you know that you doing TBL is better than anything else, or what you've done previously? Mm-hmm. So let me address that. So I've been teaching this course for a long time. When I switched over to TBL, the first time I did it, kind of rusty, but I covered, in terms of content, I covered about equivalent amount of content, but with better results, both on the evaluations of assessments of learning, exams and stuff, and also on the quality of the assignments. As time went on, I was able to cover more and more content, to the point now where I would actually turn to faculty members mid-semester and say, I've run out of things to do, which is kind of scary when you have 300 students. But I thought, well, this is great, so I can do even more. So now I cover, and I'm not making this up, about twice as much as I used to, at a much deeper level, and I'm constantly ratcheting it up. I actually am thinking of questions that would be hard for me to answer and throwing those out at the students to critically engage them. And so the students are really learning far more. I can objectively evaluate it by looking at the equivalent exam over time, or the equivalent assignments over time, or the level of difficulty of the assignments over time. It has really changed the focus of the course. I don't know if that kind of gets more at what you were asking.
Yeah. I saw you do have from time.
Longitudinally. Yeah, I thought of actually doing a real experiment, splitting and saying, okay, I'm going to teach this class non-TBL and this one. But ethically, I don't think I can do that, because I really believe TBL is so much better that it would break my heart for the students that aren't getting that experience.
Would that also reflect in the student grade too?
I'm sorry?
Would that your effectiveness reflect from the student, grade? You grade the student, right?
Yes.
Would that also somewhat correspond to each other, somewhat reflect from each other, or not?
Well, the grades overall haven't gone up that much because I've made the assignments harder. But if I look at, the test that I kept constant, those grades went up. But the course has gotten far more challenging.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm asking separately,
Yeah.
because your effectiveness supposed to reflect from the students'
Right.
learning.
Yeah, great. That was a great question. I think, please.
I really love the team-based learning. Actually, I tried to set up use this strategy in class, but the problem, the question is how do you set up the teams? Because some students could be, really good team. They're very active. They can learn better. But some students, they design or maybe organize a team which is not letting people are actively involved, and which can make the team even worse. So how can we set up the teams? What's the trick you can do there?
Well, you have to come to our session to find out.
Yeah, we have to save some wonderful things for the session. That's a great question. Yeah, please.
I want to ask, I've been intrigued by this, but I have to say I'm someone who's a little hesitant to kind of jump in with both feet in all of these. I've heard things already that are, kind of piquing my interest. In part because I come from a discipline where we do work in solitary fashion. As a historian, collaboration is not encouraged. In fact, it's rather discouraged because it leads to plagiarism and various other problems, right? I spend most of my time in a musky archive on my own. I think in teaching, I can clearly see how collaboration will be useful. But in terms of thinking about how you take a discipline that's premised upon one person and his or her intellect, and Neil knows this because his discipline works very similarly, right? How do you break out of that mold, both in your teaching and then find ways so that assessments of group work among students, which I have to say makes my spidey sense go off a little bit, right? How do you break through or try to, I don't know, just test a little bit those disciplinary boundaries for disciplines in which collaboration is not, intrinsic? In the sciences, I think that this is perfect, right? Because you do so much collaboration. Or at least that's my sense of it as someone who does, humanities, right? We don't publish papers with our graduate students or with our undergraduates or with one another. We don't. That's not accepted really in our discipline. Books, yes, but not, those other things. So how do we get past those concerns?
I could say something to that briefly. I share your concerns because as an anthropology is also, it's interdisciplinary in a sense, but the way that we conduct research and carry out writing is very independent. Yeah. So that was also a kind of something that I've had to work through in going through this collaborative teaching process. And I think that for me, I kind of have thought about this experience as taking a leap of faith, right? And I think that you really have to trust the people who you're taking a leap of faith with. It's kind of a rough and tumble experience, and it can work really, really well, right? So when it works well, I think that you and your colleagues are all looking at the same object, which is like the material to be covered that day, right, or the topic, but you're asking different kinds of questions about it. And so if you're open to having those conversations and if you're open to kind of questioning your own assumptions, that can be really productive and exciting. But I think that it can also become deformed a little bit, right, if you don't have good working relationships, positive working relationships, and good communication.
I may or may not ever have an opportunity to work or collaborate with colleagues, but if I want to employ some of these other possible tools, right, into my classroom, those disciplinary boundaries still exist because I'm teaching from a particular disciplinary perspective, right? So how do I embrace team-based learning when collaboration is not really what we do?
Okay, so can I deflect that question to Charlie? Because I know he's got an answer for this. I'm serious.
Well, I guess I'll come up with something. I think as far as learning, no matter what the subject is, I mean, I understand people do this their own thing, but I think as students, they're still learning together, right? So I think there are various issues with history that can be discussed as teams and as challenges and thinking together. I think what you do as a teacher and what you do as a student can be very different, and I think team-based learning could work very well with that.
I think also, this sounds like a shameless plug, but I'm really serious. I think that the faculty learning communities create a space for that, and a space that over time, as you build critical mass, can shift the culture within a department. Yeah. And I think that I've seen that happen within English over the last few years, because I think most people in English studies have a similar perspective in terms of research, not everyone, but we had, 6 or 8 people, I think, last year that were in a faculty learning community with me. We also had a couple of people who were participating in the Bruning Teaching Academy. So, and then we've had additional people participate in it this year. So that's given probably a third of the faculty this other space where we were working on common problems and problems that it was acceptable to be common problems and to have common solutions for them. And I think that developing that critical mass of people is now reshaping other conversations in the department about how we approach different classes. Not to say that we've arrived or anything, but I think there is discernible movement. And also I think working on these pedagogical problems has created some energy to do scholarly work around the scholarship of teaching and learning that will be collaborative, that would never have happened had we not had this other context where we were working on it.
Thanks so much. That's great to hear. Sherry, please.
I just
just want to mention you can always collaborate with your subject librarian.
Just saying. Yeah, please, in the back.
Use Jeff Shane, really.
So in the back, please.
Yes, without saying my name or colleges I'm following, I was on the experiential world for quite a few years, came here a couple of years ago, and after running a couple of major companies out there in the world, as they say, in the forest, through the trails, came here and teaching at 3 different colleges here. 2 of the colleges, I found incredible openness with all the faculty on working together, learning how to, sharing ideas, what have you. And the 3rd college is absolutely stepping on toes, possibly a jealousy, whatever, from coming from another world, what have you. In that 3rd college, how do you all recommend for a newbie getting involved in building a relationship and really helping? Because ultimately, my goal, as your all's are, we have 42,000 customers at Ohio University, and I want to do everything I can to help them out from the experiential world as well as teaching here now. How do I build a opening with this particular college group of people? Without saying, because I don't want to throw anybody under the bus.
So arts and sciences is not the 3rd college. So we would welcome you to join one of our faculty learning communities, which we will be continuing on in the coming year. I think Bob has something to say.
I mean, this is what this is about. This is what this is about, is confronting that culture, I think, and convincing people that actually you have way more in common than you realize. And I've always been so impressed. I don't know if that was the experience you all had, that for a big piece of my career, I taught proposal writing, or facilitated proposal writing. And a very common thing for people to say was, oh, people from another discipline can't help me. It's total crap. Total crap. But I heard that so predictably. And the fallacy is seeing the content as somehow dictating the expertise. And it's just not true. It's so much process. Like even Muriel was talking about these TAs that are doing so different things. Yep. But when you start thinking about what's in common, you say, oh my gosh, interacting with students in these various ways, there's a lot of commonality of what you want students to understand. So I want to give a chance for more conversation. But
can I just jump? In fact, and I can say this because Dean Frank is not my dean, but he's really been fabulous at creating this culture of teaching in the College of Arts and Sciences, and like even getting, me sucked in from the College of Business. Not just through this, but through the Bruning Teaching Academy. And I think it helps when you've got leadership on top, maybe in that 3rd college, whatever it is, that helps get the ball rolling.
Yeah, Linda, please, and then.
I think this is especially for Haley, but so I'm so intrigued by the themes. It's been interesting to see them developing over the past few years, and yet there's been this question in my mind: if one gets involved in a theme and you have to collaborate, right, in order for it to be successful, I could see the advantage of when teams work well, you've got more ideas, more input, more perspective. But what about the time? So I'd like to hear kind of how you manage the time. It seems like it would be an enormous time commitment. Is it a net gain? Is it somewhere in between? Is it?
Right. I thought you were about to say, how do you manage the time when it goes wrong? But you're just saying, how do you manage the time, right? Yeah. Right. So that is a good question. I mean, I feel that the various themes, Nuket is here also representing War and Peace theme, among others, so she might wish to speak to this as well. I feel like, as with any initiative, the themes initiative is in the beginning stages, right? So this is the start of a process, and anytime that you're building something new, it is going to take some time investment, right? So my feeling is that there's an initial period of time investment, and then once they're a little bit more institutionalized and once the models are in place, that will become more routinely integrated into the way that the college operates. So this seems to me like a building phase, right? I'm not sure exactly what the end point of that will look like, But, you know, we're kind of moving through the phases of building, and so it is a little bit time intensive at the moment. So for each one of the themes, there are different individuals who are in kind of positions of coordinating the themes, who are sort of managing that in different ways, and then just a variety of people, of faculty who are participating in different ways. I think the other thing, just to speak to the conversation that we had a moment ago about college culture, the themes are being developed at the same time that I think there is this cultural shift, institutional cultural shift happening across the college. And so that kind of energy is there. And so that also accounts, you know, for some of the enthusiasm around the themes and also kind of some of the investment in the building phase also. It's part of a larger process of changing the culture away from the siloed model of education, where everyone's invested in a particular department, a particular disciplinary perspective, and more opportunities for integration and teaching across boundaries can exist.
And just to add to this from the team's perspective, it doesn't mean that all the theme-affiliated faculty have to contribute at the same level at a given time. So if you are more comfortable leading an extracurricular event or talk, but you don't feel ready to participate actively in team teaching, that's great. You know, just come in and participate in this event. And it's because we always have these questions from our members as well. Well, you know, do we need to be friends in order to show each course? And it's a difficult question. So let's be friends. But yes, I mean, it would be great if we are friends and if we know each other outside of that room, but it might take some time. I mean, this year, next year, it might be XYZ who are participating in team teaching, and then the other year it might be a totally different set of people. But as long as we keep this contact, it's just up to individual faculty members to decide what they are ready for.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah, please.
So I just wanted to mention that I think participating in the themes and these seminars have really planted the seed of this collaboration. I'm in biology, Chris, I see several other faculty members here. So when you had this faculty learning community and you had your last day, did you talk about how to translate what you learned and bring it into the department so that we could create this collaboration within our departments? Did you have an idea of how to do that?
Are you asking that of a particular individual or just broadly?
Just broadly, like how can we use what you've learned in your faculty learning community to start more collaboration within our department?
So I'd like to just respond broadly and then ask panelists to maybe speak to their particular collaboration. So that's part of this idea for the showcase, is to share out to the college and the university broadly about what people have been doing within their collaborative efforts. And each of the groups have actually developed, might call them products of learning over the course of the semester or the year. The e-portfolio that Muriel mentioned, the blog that Neil has mentioned, the Talinn and Don have developed a wonderful handbook for working with multilingual and international students. So each of these groups is actually, as part of their faculty learning communities, have developed products that can be shared out with colleagues broadly. And then similarly with the themes groups are developing curricular and other materials to share out. So I'm really glad that you asked that. And we are going to be developing a website on the College of Arts and Sciences webpage that will be focused on teaching, learning, and assessment. And then cumulatively, as these products are developed, we'll be posting those materials on the website. So did you want to say something more?
Yes, I would like to add that we're going to have a survey because we really need your feedback. We only had, like I said, colleagues from math, physics, myself from modern languages, English, and biology. But if you are working with TAs or some of your colleagues are working with TAs or you see something in your department, we have a survey. We have plenty of room for you to leave us your comments because we are planning on not only taking this to our departments, but continuing the group and continuing our efforts with the portfolio, maybe developing the portfolio into part of the official website. And so we do have things in mind to continue the collaboration. So please leave us your feedback.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, please.
Well, another quick question unrelated to the previous one. I found out in my first semester teaching here 2 years ago about the number of students. I preface this by saying thank goodness for the College of Arts and Sciences Lateral side and those who teach writing, including in the College of Business. So important. I was flabbergasted at the number of students, juniors and seniors, who did not know how to properly write. My biggest single concern was they didn't know how to address an envelope. Because in all my classes, every class I've been all semester long, they have to write a letter or card or something, address it properly, and the reward is I give them a postage stamp. At the end of the semester, I got one of my students who said, geez, I sent it to my mom, and I spoke to her the other day, and she was crying on the phone. I said, oh, I'm sorry. Did you have your mom cry? She said, no, she was crying from happiness that she actually got a letter from me. So my question is, and I'm trying to spread it around, what can we do collaboratively? More and more interaction with the students on getting them to be able to write by hand in the great world of computers.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really good question that maybe could follow up on with some representatives from English and other places. But yeah, thank you for raising that question. You know, the issue that's been brought up about sharing and collaboration obviously is university-wide, and I am looking over at a new colleague at Ohio University, and I'm kind of putting him on the spot at the moment, but if you haven't had a chance yet to meet Brad Cohen, who's a senior vice provost for instructional innovation, he's been here just a couple of months, and I know he's been very actively inquiring around with different groups at the university about what is needed to promote teaching, learning, and these kinds of collaborations. So do you mind speaking a little bit to this? It seems like a great opportunity, perhaps.
Well, good morning, everyone. I haven't met you, I'd like to, so maybe you can reach out to me sometime for a cup of coffee. This has been very stimulating. I have a lot of questions I'd like to ask and a lot of comments I'd like to make. I think one question I would ask is, I'm interested in expertise, and Bob, you mentioned expertise. Several of you mentioned Tim Vickers. I'm wondering if in your work you have sought expertise on campus and discovered that it's not there. I think this question or this challenge of preparation, student readiness, is something I've heard from a lot of conversations. It's not just about writing. It's about reading. It's about collaboration. It's about what kind of productivity is expected out of our students. It's about life balance. It's about how do they find their way through a set of opportunities that's vast in scope, but unfocused. All of the student affairs themes, right? Themes is one way forward, right?
That's the whole idea.
Absolutely. That's right. You're trying to make visible to students and draw out of them the interest that's already there and give it force and focus. That's our job, right? So I think this challenge of collaboration is enormous for an institution like this. How do we collaborate across departments? How do we collaborate within disciplines? Professionals who won't even speak to each other about their research for fear of exposing it. We have tremendous challenges in our capacity to collaborate the way we need to. We need to collaborate not just across departments or across the hallway. We need to collaborate across the system. We need to collaborate across the state that we now occupy as a university. We need to collaborate globally. So how do we develop the power and the skill and the understanding to do that? I think one of the things that the faculty learning community research has been really good about is trying to understand how to measure good collaboration. Team-based learning, it's a critical part of that. How do you measure team health? That's one question. But the other question is, how do you encourage team health more quickly? So in your faculty learning communities, what do you do in the first day, the first week, the first month to try to cement those relationships that are so important to healthy collaboration? These kinds of questions, I could go on and on and on, but I'm really interested in those sorts of issues. How do we understand the nature of collaboration and systematically, institutionally encourage it for the benefit of our students and for ourselves as researchers? So those are questions I hope to engage you in over the course of the next several years. Thank you.
So you're not offering an answer right now. What
I learned is you have a lot of questions.
Other questions,
Thank you.
comments? Yeah, sure, thank you. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I was struck by the difference Raymond made about team-based learning and team teaching. Are there any particular challenges, difficulties relating both in the same class, or is it preferable to keep those separate? Team-based learning as opposed to team teaching with team-based learning.
I mean, I think you could do it and it would be great, but I haven't done it. I don't. Charlie, do you know anyone that's done that? Yeah.
I think it's just like any team sport. If you have good assistants, then you're going to make your team work. So it would be a challenge, and you got to dare to step out of it. But if you put it in a sporting context, which is my role.
There you go.
Some of this team-based stuff, I'm like, okay, it makes sense to me, but encouraging everybody to accept that environment, and particularly when we're getting young people and sport has potentially a negative use. We know the benefits. We know why children drop out of sport, and the number one reason why they drop out of sport is because of poor coaching. So if you think of yourself as poor teaching, then that's why we don't have potentially why we don't have a connect with our students. And we really need to, I think, continue to look at this model and other collaborative models, because I feel that's not what they're all being taught in K through 12. And so you have to kind of educate them. We'll use that word, right? Simply just and I was looking at the blog. How do you write an email? If you don't get mad at your students for not addressing you by a name at least. It might not be the proper name. They may come up with your abbreviated last name in your email thinking that's your full name. But at least they're attempting more than just, hey.
Well, now I'm thinking about a postcard and a stamp. Thank you. So we have time for one more question or comment. Someone who maybe hasn't had a chance to raise a question or a comment yet. Yeah, please.
I teach international students in the OB program before they, or as they are embarking into the world of academia, and we, for a variety of reasons, part is their academic preparation, part is to just be using the language. We do a lot of team-based activities, learning activities in the class, and very, very many of our students come from cultures where they've never experienced that sort of thing before, and in fact it's at times shocking because the paradigm is that the professor knows it all, and why am I paying $1 billion to a high university to be talking with people who don't yet know the language? It's not a hard sell. I think that students begin to realize what's happening pretty quickly, but there are three things that I and probably most of my colleagues do when we are trying to sort of set the superstructure for the teams to work. One of the things we do is ask students to identify themselves as being, I really enjoy speaking. I'm a person who likes to talk. And I am much, much more comfortable listening. I'm not very comfortable talking. And so we sort of, it's dual, but the students kind of classify themselves in one group or another, and then we say, well, okay, in order for this team to work, everybody has to participate. So, and for anybody in this room that's ever studied a foreign language, if you were comfortable speaking, you know how you loved hearing your voice with that French accent or that Arabic accent, and it would be, if you were confident and felt like you did a pretty good job, it's fun to talk a lot because you sound so cool. And so of course that happens with students who are learning English and enjoy speaking, so we'd have to say, okay, although you're very comfortable talking, your really big job is going to be to listen. You must participate, you have to talk, but you also have to listen because your quieter or more shy or more embarrassed classmates, they might have fantastic ideas. And then we'd look to the students that self-classified as I'm a quiet person, and it's like, okay, guys, you can't snooze. Teaching the word snooze. You can't sleep on the job.
All right.
You have great ideas. And you have to try. So okay, everybody had their task. In addition to talking.
And I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we are sort of running a little bit out of time.
Okay,
so
very
maybe
quick.
just to
Second
summarize.
thing is to rotate every time you do a group activity, a facilitator, and you teach what it means to be a facilitator. And the big deal is the facilitator doesn't know the right answers. The facilitator makes sure everybody has a chance to participate. And the last final thing is just to talk about with the whole class ways of disagreeing that are not insulting or embarrassing.
Yeah.
So those are sort of the three things, and then sometimes just stick it up on a giant Post-it note and keep reminding them before the group activity of what we got to do.
Thank you so much. Those are really helpful tips, I think. Thank you. Sounds like a good session for our next showcase. So the question came up about how to enrich, promote, support collaborations within a department, a college, a university, and I would say faculty learning communities are really key to doing that. And Talinn touched on this when you talked about kind of culture changes within a department. The research on faculty learning communities shows that this is really one of the most effective ways to affect culture change within an academic unit, whatever the size of that unit. And I would see the themes as also forms of faculty learning communities. These are faculty-led, faculty-generated groups on topics that are of interest to faculty. So these are kind of bubbling up, but with support from in administrative structures in terms of budgets and other kinds of support that's needed to make these successful endeavors. So I really appreciate all of our panelists and sharing out. And I want to say, first I want to have a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so much.